California was dying of thirst. The worst drought in the state's recorded history, wildfires raging, residents facing mandatory water rationing, lawns turning brown, and in the middle of this crisis, Nestlé was extracting tens of millions of gallons of water from California's national forests, bottling it and selling it back to Americans for billions in profit, all on a permit that expired in 1988, a permit that cost them $524 a year. This isn't just corporate greed, this is one of the most brazen examples of resource theft in modern American history. Let me explain. The story begins in the San Bernardino National Forest, a pristine mountain wilderness in Southern California. For over a century, water from Arrowhead Springs has been bottled and sold. The springs were named after a natural rock formation shaped like a giant arrowhead on the mountainside. In the 1800s, it was a glamorous resort destination. By the 1900s, it became a water bottling operation. Nestlé acquired Arrowhead Water in 1987, making them the largest bottled water producer in America overnight. They inherited permits from the previous owners to extract water from Strawberry Creek and other springs in the national forest. The permits set specific limits on how much water they could take and cost $524 per year in fees to the US Forest Service. Here's the problem. Those permits expired in 1988, and for the next 27 years, Nestlé kept pumping water anyway. Nobody stopped them. The Forest Service never renewed the permits. They never conducted environmental reviews. They just let Nestlé continue operating as if nothing had changed. In 2015, investigative reporter Ian James from the Desert Sun newspaper uncovered what was happening. His expose revealed that Nestlé was extracting approximately 27 million gallons per year from Strawberry Creek alone, using permits that had been expired for decades. When you added in other sites like Deer Canyon and groundwater sources, the total reached over 700 million gallons of California water per year, and this was happening during California's worst drought on record. The state had been in severe drought since 2012. Residents were being fined for watering their lawns, farmers were watching crops die, wildlife was suffering, and Nestlé was draining public water from national forests to sell in plastic bottles. The math is staggering. Nestlé paid $524 per year for the expired permit. They extracted tens of millions of gallons. They bottled it as Arrowhead 100% mountain spring water and sold it across the western United States. A single 1-liter bottle retails for around $1.50 to $2. Nestlé Waters North America, which includes Arrowhead, generated approximately $8 billion in annual revenue. The markup from what they paid for the water to what they charged consumers was astronomical, estimated at up to 2,000 times the cost. Environmental groups were outraged. In 2015, the Center for Biological Diversity, Story of Stuff Project, and Courage Campaign filed a federal lawsuit against the US Forest Service, demanding they stop Nestlé's operations. The lawsuit pointed out that Strawberry Creek had been rated as impaired due to the water extraction. The creek couldn't support the wildlife that depended on it. Endangered species like the California spotted owl, southwestern willow flycatcher, and two-striped garter snake were being harmed. Nestlé's response? Absolutely not leaving California. In fact, their CEO Tim Brown said, "If I could increase it, I would." When asked if the company would move operations out of the drought-stricken state, he doubled down. The company claimed they were good stewards of the land and that their water extraction was sustainable. Critics pointed out the absurdity. While Starbucks had moved their bottling operations out of California entirely due to drought shaming, Nestlé actually increased their extraction. They pulled more water during the drought than before it. They showed no signs of concern for the communities suffering around them. The controversy intensified when activists discovered that Nestlé had another operation on the Morongo Indian Reservation, where they'd partnered with the Morongo tribe to extract water from Millard Canyon. The tribe had purchased water rights from the Cabazon Water District for just $3 million in the early 2000s, then immediately signed a deal with Nestlé. That facility alone produced over 1 billion bottles per year. This became a pattern. Nestle would partner with Native American tribes on sovereign land to evade federal regulations and public scrutiny. They'd pay the tribes undisclosed fees for access to water sources, then ship that water out in plastic bottles for massive profits while local ecosystems suffered. In 2017, after years of complaints and lawsuits, California's State Water Resources Control Board finally launched a full investigation. Their findings were damning. Nestlé lacked valid legal rights to much of the water they'd been taking for decades. The company claimed rights based on a 1909 contract, but investigators found that contract didn't cover the amount Nestlé was actually extracting. The investigation revealed that Nestlé was permitted to take 2.3 million gallons per year. They'd been taking approximately 58 million gallons per year. That's 25 times more than legally allowed. In April 2021, California regulators issued a draft cease and desist order to stop the water extraction. By this point, Nestlé had already sold their North American water division to One Rock Capital Partners and Metropolis and Company for $4.3 billion. The new company, BlueTriton Brands, inherited the controversy. September 2023 brought the final blow. California regulators ordered BlueTriton to stop using the majority of springs they'd relied on for over a century. The ruling stated the company had no valid water rights and had drained Strawberry Creek to the point where it couldn't sustain dependent wildlife. Today, Arrowhead bottles, now red, proudly sourced in British Columbia, instead of from California Springs. The company was forced to find new sources after decades of theft. But here's what makes the story even more infuriating. Nestlé's water empire extends far beyond California. They have 27 production facilities across North America. In Michigan, while the city of Flint suffered from lead-poisoned water, Nestlé was pumping 200 gallons per minute from a well in Evart for a $200 annual fee. The optics were devastating. A community without safe tap water, while a corporation shipped their region's water out in plastic bottles. The environmental impact goes beyond water depletion. It takes 1.39 liters of water to fill a 1 liter bottle, and twice that amount to manufacture the plastic bottle itself. The bottled water industry is one of the largest contributors to global plastic pollution. Most bottles aren't recycled and end up in landfills or oceans. And the corporate structure that enabled all this? Nestlé is a Swiss multinational that reported $92 billion in total revenue in 2019. Their water division was just one piece of a massive empire that includes everything from baby formula to coffee. When public pressure became too intense, they simply sold the North American water business for $4.3 billion and walked away. The people who fought back deserve recognition. Retired Forest Service employees who raised the alarm, local activists who showed up to courtrooms and rallies, investigative journalists who exposed the scandal, environmental groups who filed lawsuits and FOIA requests. They all understood something fundamental. Water is a human right, not a commodity for corporations to exploit. So the next time you reach for a bottle of water, remember, somewhere a corporation extracted that water from public land for pennies, packaged it in plastic that will pollute for centuries, and sold it back to you at a 2,000% markup. And in places like California, they did it during the worst drought in history on expired permits, while communities suffered from water shortages. That's not business, that's theft, and Nestlé got away with it for decades.